What's up, YouTube? Played another Dimir League. Wanted to try out Force Negation, something that I said in one of the Discords that I wanted to at least try out, see how it goes. So this is our first attempt at a league. We threw in a couple copies. One over. I was running like 2 or 3 opt, just to kind of go on this like turbo Xerox idea, and ended up cutting one of the ops. Actually, I've cut a bunch of the ops, but effectively cut an opt, cut the fourth drown in the lock for 2 copies of Force Negation just to try it out. I don't know if it's a main or a sideboard card, but I at least wanted to try it out in the main to see if I saw it more often. One of the things I've been kind of running into when I run 4 Murktide, I feel like I see 2 or 3 of them a lot more than I want to. So I'm hoping like, hey, Force Negation might give me something to pitch Murktide to, get some value. But whenever I run 3 Murktide, I feel like I never see them. So I'm trying to come up with a balance. I figure having a bunch of draw effects will like help me to dig to Murktide if I run less of them. And if I run more of them, then having some use for them in hand might help out. But anyway, that's the general idea here. Nothing else really has changed. Just I like tweaking like a little thing at a time instead of a bunch of pieces, because I have a baseline idea of how the deck's been functioning without Force of Negation. Now I just want to make that like one little adjustment and kind of see what happens. So here we go. Strap in. Also, I found out they make these like Snickers iced coffee drinks, and this thing is like fantastic. So if you see me just like ignoring commentary and drinking iced coffee, you know why. Opening hand, 1 lander, but we got a bunch of cantrips. Opponents on Yawgmoth, so that's a little bit rough. Like, good chance our Stubborn Denial's dead. This Drowning Lock's not looking too good just yet. But more importantly, we just need to like find another land or two. Uh, Unfortunately, that's not a land. Like, it's not a bad spot we're in, especially if our opponent's missing land drops. But it's not exactly a good spot either. I could have like main phased either the Fatal Push or the Dismember there, but kind of wanted to wait, let them go to attacks, and then use my spell. And since I happen to hit the other land here, I get to at least get down double shadow, so I'm not just like completely screwed to say a Yawgmoth here. Since they don't activate and go ahead and make the block, then I do get to kill the Yawgmoth with them only getting 1 Undying trigger or 1 Yawgmoth trigger. Usually that would mean they have a second Yawgmoth. Unfortunately, it's just Grist. But it's not like a horrible spot here. Because, I mean, they've kind of played their trump card. Their battlefield's not that scary. In this case, we get the Grist off the board and we get to hold up counterspells. So I guess just like giving up half a Young Wolf and something else was just too much to ask. Get to stub an Eldritch Evolution. So now they're kind of in like possibly double chump block mode. Or in this case, cast a Chord of Calling, get it countered in die mode. So take what we can get. Sideboarding against Yawgmoth, boarding in things like Dress Down, Unlicensed Hearse, any extra removal spells that I've got, and usually trimming on some number of like Street Wraith. Stubborn Denial's pretty bad because it doesn't answer Grist. It does answer Eldritch Evolution and Chord of Calling, but some number of those things are usually getting trimmed post board. I don't really like Shieldred's Edict here, but the idea is kind of just bringing in anything that says kill a dude, and maybe I can finagle my way to having them low on threats and then get some value out of Edict. Plus, it's kind of have nice to have a backdoor answer to random stuff like Chameleon Colossus and Thrun and just off the wall stuff you would never expect, but every now and then somebody will play. So you're gonna Eldritch Evolution for Grist, which means this Murktide is not long for this world. But we do get value out of the Shieldred's Edict by making them sack a Grist. So hey, positive, right? Now we're just gonna blow up this Wall of Roots. I really want to see if they'll just crack this Peat land, which they do. Which means if they do have like a follow up Yawgmoth, it's on an empty board. If they had a Grist, that would be a little more unfortunate, but can't do too much about it. Anyway, do get to snipe the last card out of hand. Wall of Roots and Blood Artist in like the scariest duo. Obviously, immediately top decking a Yawgmoth is a little unfortunate, but at the same time, I do have a reasonably sized Murktide, and if they sack anything to the Yawgmoth, then I can kill it, and they either have to make a decision on like machine gunning down their board for a couple cards or letting the Yawgmoth go. In this case, they just let the Yawgmoth go. So I know I've got a Murktide. I've got the ability to start growing this hearse. I feel like if I can find one more reasonable piece of interaction, like a Drown in the Lock, I might have an okay shot here. I mean, they're swinging in for a whopping 0 power right now. And I'm certainly not letting another Yawgmoth resolve. That's 3 Yawgmoths seen so far. Um, Dismember is pretty good pickup. That'll let me like clear out the skies in case this Murktide becomes potentially lethal. If you didn't notice there, we did eat stuff out of our yard a couple times to turn this Murktide from like a 5-turn clock to a 2-turn. And like I said, now that we know everything in their hand, we can just safely dismember this Birds of Paradise and have a lethal Murktide attacking through on our turn. And counterspell drawings just like the icing on the cake. So we do end up 2-0 over Yawgmoth. Not an easy matchup, but sometimes things line up. On the play, looks like we're against Rhinos. Gemstone Cavern, usually pretty indicative of the Team of Rhinos deck. Hopefully, our Consider here can find something. So I wasn't going to crack that fetch land, but as soon as my opponent uh, suspended the Footfalls, then I knew they couldn't hold up Fire and Ice. So if I did draw into a counter spell or scry into one, they wouldn't be able to ice down my second land and then resolve like a cascade spell. So just know that I was not going to consider until they put or gave me like the green light. All right, so we got Outburst for Footfalls. Hopefully they don't have a Force. Looks like they do not. Might have just like another one on their main phase. In which case I have to decide if I'm going to like Archmage's Charm, steal a Rhino, or get down a Murktide. Personally, I like the Murktide line a little bit more just because it is currently like bigger than the Rhinos. And Thoughtseize kind of improves that because I get to take any sort of bounce effect that they might have. So now we're just hoping to kind of like steal a turn here, go to our turn, maybe charm a Rhino, get an attack in. I think we just decide to be a little passive in case our opponent does have like another cascade effect. Which we probably could have just charmed the Rhino and attacked anyway. So yeah, I think that was a little too passive. I think we should have just charmed the Rhino and attacked. Or no, actually, that's what it was. They had the Rhino coming off suspend, and I wanted to fight over that and have another counter spell in case they had force negation. But then when they didn't have the answer to my counter spell, then I decided to go to my turn, steal the Rhino, attack him with the Murktide. blah 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 blah. Sideboarding against the Rhinos decks, Chalice of the Void, EE coming in, Path to Peril, Fluster Storms, the extra Stubborn Denial, all that sort of stuff. Hey, look, we get Force Negation. So this is kind of one of those things I'm really wanting to test out is, hey, in these hands like this where we're low on lands, um, and I should have gone ahead and gone for the opt. Like, I figured my opponent was going to untap, find a third land, and Shardless Agent, but I have Force of Negation. So I should have just gone for the opt to try to hit another land drop. And if I did, then maybe I could hold up Flusterstorm instead, or whatever the case may be. Probably just soft Stubborn Denial. But like the whole purpose of putting Force of Negation in the deck is for spots like this to be able to just tap out on my turn. And tapping out would have put me in a much better spot. I guess technically it wouldn't have mattered, but would have given me a better shot at hitting a land. And that's kind of what I needed there is lands. Instead, I tap out on this turn and they can Violent Outburst and Mystical Dispute my counterspell. But maybe if I'd got them to like fight over the first, what was it, opt or consider or something, then maybe I get there. But all in all, things just kind of snowballed a little too much this game. I could have kept the land, but I need a threat or EE or something. Either way, get to go to game 3. All right, so we do keep a one lander, but we have Chalice, Path of Peril, Drown in the Lock, Counterspell, Consider, so a bunch of really good tools. I definitely think if your meta is really high on like Rhinos and Living End, Chalice of the Void is extraordinarily good out of this deck because you get to, like in a situation like this, play it and have counter magic up. So you can play it, counter if they have Force of Negation or something, gets around Mystical Dispute, and you get to take that like play it, forget it approach of just drop it and immediately ignore half the stuff your opponent does from here on out. Like here, if they're casting a cascade spell into the chalice, knowing it's there, then I'm assuming they don't have an answer to the chalice. So I'm just gonna like keep the threat off the board, put another creature in the yard or another card in the yard to play Murktide, and just kind of like assume you can't do anything about this. Because either you have to answer the Murktide or you have to answer the Chalice. If you answer the Murktide, the Chalice stays on counters the Footfalls. If you answer the Murktide, or if you answer the Murktide, then the Chalice stays and answers the Footfalls. If you answer the Chalice, then the Murktide stays and kills you. So either one of those seemed like pretty positive outcomes for me. We do get to counter a Dead and Gone, keep our attack going. Ultimately, we're thinking if our opponent like does answer this Murktide, then hopefully we can just like find another land, get down Double Shadow or something. Or like here, they've got Mystical Dispute, Violent Outburst, Otawara. Uh, we can force the Murktide trade and then just like play Double Shadow and say, cool. If you want to Otawara one, you're dead to the other. If you top deck like an Evoked Fury, then you're dead to them. So this is round 3, 4, something. Esper Sentinel. So I thought it was Hammer Time, and then Force of Virtue means probably not Hammer Time. I think it's one of these like mono white humans kind of decks. Um, Obviously, kind of rough start for us having this double drown and no cards in their yard. but at the same time, like they're not really doing anything scary. They just have an Esper Sentinel. This is Screaming Force or Shining Shoal. Yeah, that thing. So they do get to kill my shadow, which is okay because I just have more shadows. And now they have a card in the yard. So if they made an attack again, I could have fought over it. But we're kind of okay giving them a card. We just get like the upper hand here. We can hold up counterspell. We can consider. We can steal the champion of the parish, whatever the situation dictates. We can play a bunch of cantrips. Thoughtseize is good. Let's talk about the. Actually, I don't think there's much that Thoughtseize take. They've got like double Adeline Extraction Specialist in a hand with only one land. Double Thalia's Lieutenant with one land. So even if they find the land, I can just counter the Thalia's Lieutenant. Or if they have like a Cavern of Souls, then I will let the Thalia's Lieutenant resolve, put the counters on the Champion of the Parish, and then just like yoink it with the Archmage's Charm. Sideboarding against this deck, like Force Negation, Stubborn Denials, easy cuts. And then trimming on like Thoughtseize and Street Wraith, bringing in Engineered Explosives, Turok, Fatal Push, the Shieldred's Edict, EE, Dress Down. Bringing in a bunch of stuff. Little Sanctifier on Vec action, and then immediately draw into the Shieldred's Edict. I could have just main phased this Shieldred's Edict, and that probably plays around anything. Like it doesn't target, so I'm not concerned about Surge of Salvation or something like that. And I figured like, oh, I can respond to them putting any creature on the stack with Shieldred's Edict. I did not think about Mutavault in their deck, and especially not Mutavault into 2-drop. So I don't know if I would call that a punt. I actually didn't know they ran Mutavault, so that's kind of good to know. But I'm sure if I had thought about it, I still would not have thought about Mutavault. So now we get to. Probably should have played out the Shadow here and just planned to like get basic island and yoink the Kithian. Like I was planning on yoinking the Kithian regardless because it blocks the Sanctifier if they attack with it. Um, but I definitely should have played out the Shadow. I think I was really afraid of Adeline. So I wanted to like hold up Archmage's Charm and Fatal Push. Like be able to fetch shock Fatal Push the Adeline and like Archmage's Charm to yoink the Kithian or something. It's like another Shining Shoal. Yep. I appreciate the fact that Shining Shoal has just like randomly become a modern playable card out of nowhere. Then my opponent's like scoops to EE, blowing up the Sanctifier, which I guess I kind of get because it's just like a 2-turn clock with Shadow, so they have to chump block very quickly. But at the same time, I feel like you got some number of outs, like an Adeline off the top just wrecks me. So this is match 4. On the play, we've got Thoughtseize, Stub, Charm. See, Explore. Usually, Explore kind of signifies a Scape Shift style deck. Obviously, it's different if Amulet Titan is involved, but when you see like Wrenn and 6, Explore, Valakut, okay, it's a deck that wants to hit a bunch of lands pretty quickly. Scape Shift is like the first thing that comes to mind. Find a threatened Murktide. We definitely want to go ahead and get that down. They're ways off of Valakut. And if they did top deck another Lightning Bolt like right now, then yeah, they kill my Murktide. But if they didn't top deck a Lightning Bolt right this second, then I think the Murktide's going to be okay. Uh, Explore into Sakura Tribuilder is pretty nice, going from 2 to 5 lands in one sequence, one like turn cycle. I think I should have Archmage's Charm to draw there. Also considered countering the Lightning Bolt there, but I kind of figured I wanted them to use all of their resources on this Murktide, and I'd be able to hopefully draw some cards and find a way out from there. Now, this is an interaction that I don't know if this is correct. If anybody plays a lot of like Scape Shift, please let me know in the comment. But my opponent plays a Dryad. Okay, so they play a Windswept Heath. They get a Valakut trigger because Dryad makes the Windswept Heath a mountain. I'm on board with this so far. I respond by Fetch Shock, Fatal Push the Dryad. And the reason I want to do this is I want them to go ahead and fetch, get the Resolve Valakut trigger, and then my Fatal Push resolves and sees that like the Windswept Heath wasn't a mountain, is my understanding. But I kill the Dryad, and the Valakut trigger resolves and kills my token. So my question for the Valakut players is, I know there is a delayed, or not a delayed trigger, was an intervening if with Valakut, like the trigger goes on the stack and then it checks on resolution to make sure like the criteria is met, that there's got to be 5 other mountains in addition to the one entering the battlefield. But when that thing entering the battlefield is no longer a mountain, does it just say, hey, there's 5 other mountains, I'm going to bolt something? Or like, does the thing entering not have to be a mountain anymore? Because I thought it still did. Regardless, we're moving on with this game. Definitely charming to draw a couple cards here because I just need to find like interaction, counterspell, force. About as good as you can ask for. I know their last card in hand is a forest, so they've got one Valakut trigger with the Windswept Heath. I think they meant to cast a Search for Tomorrow. Instead, they accidentally suspended it. Obviously, with force and counterspell, it didn't matter, but I could see them being slightly frustrated over that if that were the case. But I really want to know about that Valakut interaction. Like, if a land enters and causes Valakut trigger to go on the stack, I'm guessing it makes sense since Valakut just says, like, hey, it deals 3 damage if there are 5 other mountains. But we'll see. Thoughtseize. There's a bunch of tribe elders, a dryad, a wish. I decided to take one of the tribe elders because, like, they can have the dryad, but ultimately they don't have a bunch of lands to take advantage of the extra land drops. So I'm less worried about that part of it. They also don't have a Valakut in hand. I've got a Murktide coming down. I know they can't play a Titan next turn. They could like wish for something, but I can Flusterstorm the wish, so I don't really know what they would look for. And then this becomes a little bit of a guessing game. So I've got the option to swing Murktide at the Wren and just take it out. Or I could attack the Murktide at them and hope that I can count over or fight over their next few plays with like counter spells and fluster storms, whatnot. Um, I end up drawing, this Archmage's Charm. So now I know their next two plays I've got covered for sure. Counterspell and Archmage's Charm to counter Titan Titan. They're going to lose a life off this Arid Mesa, go to 18. They're going to fetch again, go to 17. And I'm thinking like I could just attack them. And maybe if I attack them 3 times, counter 3 spells, then they'll have to fetch enough to where they just can't do anything more. So I kind of decided to take that route of, hey, I'm just going to try to hit you in the face and like ignore Ren, counter the big payoffs, and see what happens. Like maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. You don't have a Valakut. Use a more expensive counter first. We can kind of hold up mana. And this is kind of what I was saying with the Arid Mesa is like, hey, they're fetching. There's a reasonable chance they fetch again. Maybe they fetch a third time if they find something. So I think my consider logic here was I'm looking specifically for another Murktide so that I can just like counter this, untap, play another Murktide, win. And I didn't play this other op because I wanted to hold up Flusterstorm in case they found Veil of Summer. So I got heavily rewarded for that. And the fact that it's another op means I get more looks at another Murktide. They are now out of Primeval Titans. So, like, another Murktide would be great. Or just, like, another counter spell for Wish would be great. Thoughtseize is fine. So they've got 2 damage off the tokens, damage off the Ren Ping. So I'm dead to a I'm dead to a bolt. I'm dead to a likely a wish because they can probably find something that kills me. I'm dead to a Titan because they can just get a Valakut plus a mountain. I'm dead to them drawing a Valakut because they can just play Valakut and then search for tomorrow, get a mountain, and kill me. I'm not dead to my opponent scooping. So, nice. And on to match number 5. So, this is for the trophy. Doing the die roll. Opening hand was 6 lands and a stub into what? 5 lands or 4 lands. Street Wraith, Dress Down, Murktide. Or ditch a land, Cycle Wraith, draw a land for turns. Like, one of those starts where you know Moto isn't like that interested in you winning this game. Ren's fine. I'll go ahead and fire off this Dress Down just to try to get like a redraw. We know we're up against creativity, so drawing fatal pushes and more lands is a lot less exciting than drawing like any sort of interactive spell or any sort of counter spell, I should specify there. So keep Archmage's Charm. I am pretty sure if they make a token, like get a Dwarven Mine and cast creativity on it, and I steal the token, then it flips me into a creature. Probably wouldn't do me much good since most of my creatures are like a 3/3 Murktide or a 3/4 Street Wraith. But I did think that was kind of interesting that I had that possibility. Drown and Lock to kill the Fable in response to the Ren activation because they had 3 cards in their yard at the time. And then to Fairy just means like basically auto lose. especially when you thought seize your opponent and see double binding, double expressive iteration, double spell pierce, and all you've got's a lowly little Murktide. So, not a good spot for us at all. But this is a matchup that we really want to try out Force Negation in. Sideboarding, taking out some pushes, taking out some dismembers, bringing in EE, Flusterstorm, Children's Edict for the Planeswalkers, the extra Stubborn Denial. I think I ended up boarding out an Archmage's Charm just because I was bringing in like all this cheaper, more effective counter magic. So we get to go on a little cantrip Xerox. I am kind of thinking that Thought Scour might actually be better than the one of Opt, like 2 Thought Scour over the Opt in a Murktide or something, um, just to help fuel it a little bit. But I'm not like super convinced one way or the other. Try to fight over a counter, but like, when your opponent's sideboard is just getting them up to like 4 Veil of Summer, 4 Spell Pierce, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to have a rough time fighting over a bunch of stuff. And this is kind of one of those examples of that. Like, hey, let's go Fable plus Veil into Teferi plus Spell Pierce. And you're like, yeah, I can't fight over that in my deck full of counter spells and counter spells, Drown in the Locks, Archmage's Charm, stuff like that. So just a matter of like not being proactive enough against creativity. I think our plan against that deck is fine. Like with 3 Stubborn Denial plus 4 Counterspell and Drown in the Locks, like we should be able to interact pretty effectively against a Ren, Teferi, or Fable creativity curve out. But as soon as we start adding extra turns onto that clock, and they're able to Fable plus Veil, Teferi plus Spell Pierce, and get to like that extra mana or two, then I think our chances fall pretty drastically. Um, it might be a situation where I really need to focus more on like mulligans to a threat and like a threat we can get down pretty quickly, like fetch, Thoughtseize Shadow, fetch, Wraith Shadow, something like that to be able to get onto the board faster than our opponent. But either way, we didn't really see much from Force Negation this league. I'll probably try it again and like go up on the number, like maybe replace 3rd Stubborn Denial with 3rd Force, just to really try to see the card more often. Because out of the matches that we saw, like it's bad against the humans deck, good against creativity, um, okay against Scape Shift. Kind of depends on the hand. If they just see Steve, Dryad, Titan, obviously it's bad. But if they see Explore, Search for Tomorrow's, Wish, Scape Shift, then it's great. What were the other matchups? Something and something. Either way, I think it was like 50-50 of good versus bad Force and Negation matchups. But anyway, we'll keep trying it out and see how it goes. So look forward to the next video. Otherwise, have an awesome rest of your day. Stay safe. Enjoy some good food and company. Catch y'all back later. Adios for now.